Hello everyone, and welcome back to another installment of Java 101. Today we're going to be talking about arrays. Now, you may recall that when we talked about strings, we talked about how strings are best thought of as a collection or a list of characters. And so we could have, for example, hello. And we talked about how this was a collection of characters, and we talked about how the starting index was always 0, and it would go up to 4. The length of this string is 5, but it goes from an index of 0 to an index of 4. So because strings really are a list of characters, or what we call an array, you already have a good idea for how arrays are going to work. All that's really missing is the syntax of how to do it. And so it turns out that an array really is just a list of different types of objects. And you can create an array for any type of object in Java. It could be a primitive data type, so an array of doubles, an array of ints, or it could be an array of objects. You could create an array of strings, or even an array of scanners if you really wanted to. And the syntax for doing it is all the same. And that syntax is what we're going to explore a little bit today. So here you can see the basic syntax for declaring an array. And what I have here is this refers to the type of data that this list is going to represent. So in Java, an array can really only hold one type of data. I can have an array of integers, but I can't have an array that's of mixed types. There's a way to do that, and we'll get into that as a later topic. This notation here is the notation that says this isn't going to be just a single integer variable. It's going to represent an array. Oops, well, that looks like fun. So that means that it's going to be an array, and of course this you're already familiar with. This is just giving that array some sort of a name. Now if you remember, there are conventions in Java with regards to how to create variable names. So variable names should always start with a lowercase letter, and it should follow what's called camel case conventions. And what that means is that variables, of course, are supposed to represent the variable name is supposed to kind of represent what it's holding. And if it's going to have multiple words or multiple parts to it, we start with a lowercase, but then we use an uppercase for every word kind of within it. So I said, marks for SVS. I could do marks for the... Okay. So that's just declaring. It's not putting anything into the array, it's merely just declaring it. I could also declare an array, and I could immediately fill it with something. Like so. Now what this is going to do is it's going to declare an array, it's going to give it a name of x, and it's going to make the size of the array exactly 4 long. That's another interesting tidbit about arrays in Java, is that you can't increase or decrease the size of an array. Once you've decided on a fixed length, that's the length that array is going to have for the rest of its life. Again, we'll talk about ways of getting around that another time. So this is an array that is fixed. It's got exactly 4 spots in it. Starts at 0 and goes over to 4. There's another way of declaring an array, and let's have a quick peek at this one. So now what I've done is I've declared an array, and I've actually instantiated it, which means I've kind of reserved some memory for it. I can actually do something with this array, and I've given it a size of 100. So this array, for its lifespan, is going to be able to hold 100 different integers. So what's the difference between these 3 types? This one at the very top, I'm declaring the array, but I'm not actually reserving the memory, so I can't use it yet. I cannot use this array marks for SVS until at some point in my code I give it a particular value of what size it should be. This one over here is declaring it of a fixed size and filling it with an initial value, right? I've got 4 initial values filling it. This one over here is declaring the array. It's giving it a particular size, but it's not sort of customizing the values. The values are going to be whatever the default value is. So in the case of an integer, it's going to fill the array of zeros. In the case of an object like a string, it's not really going to fill it with anything. It's going to fill it with what's called nulls, which is when you have nothing, it's referred to as null. Some people are very curious as to whether I have to put a number in there or whether I can use a variable. And you can definitely, if you want, use a variable in there. And so what this allows you to do is, for example, ask a user. Oops, it would help if I actually used the right variable. You can ask the user how many items are you going to enter. They could type in 20, and then you could go ahead and create an array of exactly that size. So what else might you want to do with an array? Well, obviously you might want to give it a value, set a value of particular items in it. And the notation that we use is the same square bracket notation that you see here. So if I want to give the first value of y a particular number, I can go ahead and do that in this fashion. Remember, arrays always start at 0, so this is actually going to change the very first value of that. I can also get the length of an array. So this might be useful, for example, if you're trying to create a for loop. So now we have a loop that is going to go around and visit every single item, or really it's not checking the array yet, but it's going to start at 0 and it's going to go to whatever the length of that array is. The next thing that you might want to do is, of course, just access an item. So let's imagine I just wanted to print out a particular item in array y, and I wanted to print all of them out because it's in a for loop here. So I could easily say the item is, and I could just use that same square bracket notation. So all of a sudden I've gotten a little complicated here. So now what I do is I have a variable I, which is going to be looping through from 0 all the way to 100. And inside here, I am going to print the value at the index of I. So I'm going to print the value at 0, and then the value at 1, and then the value at 2, and so on and so on and so forth. So this example sort of highlights many of the things that you might want to do with an array. Here you can see the results of that. First item here is 34 because we set it here. And then we just start to loop through all of the different items. Now, I think I had erroneously said this was 100, but because we used this size, it's actually 10, which is why you're going to see 10 entries here. So the last thing that I want to go over is an advanced way of looping through an array or a list. So you can see that the for loop is a really nice construct to use to go through it. But the truth is that most of the time you're looping through an array, it's because you want access to the values inside that array. And this type of for loop doesn't directly do that. This is really just a counting for loop. I is just a number. You have to do that access directly yourself with this type of notation. There is an enhanced for loop in Java that allows you to do that in maybe a cleaner fashion. Many programmers just like to use this older way of doing it, but the enhanced loop is kind of a shortcut for these types of things. So let's imagine that we have an array of strings. And here's our names for it. And you can see it's an array. It's going to go from 0 to 3. It has 4 items in it. Another way that I could possibly loop through this is using this enhanced for loop. And so the way the enhanced for loop works, let me just get it to, let me just write it down so you can see it. Same idea here with the for. This is going to be the data type of the array. You'll see that this and this match. This is going to be a name, a variable name that you are going to use to refer to each element inside this loop that I've created. And this third spot here is the name of your array. And so what this is doing is it's saying for each item inside this list over here, I'm going to loop through it one by one, and I'm going to make name the element at that particular index. So inside here, I can use that variable name, and the first time through this loop, name is going to be Bob, and then the second time, name is going to be Joan, and then the third time, name is going to be Stephanie, and then the fourth time, name is going to be Lucy. So very different ways of accessing it. If knowing the index is important, this might be the better way, because right away it will be able to pull off the index. If I were looking for the index of a particular person. If I'm looking for really just looping through and wanting to check all of these names, then this is a nice clean way of doing that. So we're almost there. You've learned about how to create arrays. You've learned that really any data type can be put in here to create an array. Strings will work, scanners will work, your own custom data types, your own custom classes will work. And then you've sort of learned of a couple different ways of looping through it. The last sort of advanced topic that I want you to be aware of is that Java comes with a helper class for arrays, and the helper class is actually conveniently called arrays, and it's going to allow us to do a few useful things. Really briefly, I just wanted to show you the arrays class. If you're not comfortable with what's called the Java API, you really should have a look at it. It's nicely put in a web format. You can easily Google it, and anytime you want information about a class and what that class can do, it will give you the information of what methods are there and what those methods do. So in this case, we're looking at a helper arrays class within Java. Here you can see that it will allow you to do a relatively efficient search of your array if you're looking for something in particular. You can make a copy of your array. You can make a copy of a range, which is sort of like a part of your array. You can compare arrays. You can check the equality of arrays. And the list goes on, but there's two things that I think are most important for you to be aware of, and that is sorting and the toString. And so we're going to jump back into NetBeans and see how these two things might work. So here we are back in NetBeans. You'll recall that I have a couple of arrays to work with. I've got the X and I've got names here. And I mentioned that there was this helper class, and it's kind of like the math helper class in that if I want to use it, I can just call it by its name, arrays. And when I use the period, it was going to give me a list of all of the things I can do. And I said one of the useful things is to be able to sort it. And in order to sort items, I can literally just put in the name, and it will automatically go and sort that. For certain data types, like strings and doubles and ints, Java knows how to sort them. If you're trying to sort your own data type, your own class, you're going to actually have to tell Java how you want that particular class to be sorted. But in this case, since we're just dealing with strings and doubles, it's pretty straightforward. I can also go ahead and sort the X. Now, if I wanted to see whether this worked, I could absolutely go through. I could use a standard for, I could use an enhanced for, but that other method, that toString method, will automatically do that for us. It will automatically create a string that will represent all of the different items in the array. It might not look the way that you want it, and that's why I'm going to give you a quick example. So we need that system.out.println. Arrays is our helper method. I can do toString, and I can just go ahead and throw the name of the array in there. And we'll do it once for the names, and we'll just do it once more for the other thing that we've sorted. This perhaps I should change just so that we can verify that it's actually sorting something. And we can go ahead and run that. And you will see that this has now been sorted. Lucy and Stephanie have swapped places, and you'll see that this has been sorted. And this format is not exactly, I wouldn't say it's aesthetically pleasing, but it does a job, especially if you're trying to debug your code, or if you're just trying to output the contents of an array. And so from a beginning Java perspective, this is what you really want to capture as far as how to use an array, what it is, and some of the important useful methods that come from it. And that really leaves only one thing left to discuss, and that is common mistakes that you're going to find with arrays. So one of those mistakes would be, let's take our array X here, and let's try to access, okay, we can see it has 4 items, so let's try to access the 4th item and give it a value of 5, and let's go ahead and run the program. And you will see this error, and this error here is array index out of bounds exception. And if you just pull apart those words, it kind of makes sense. This means that for your array, you're trying to access an index, a position that is out of bounds. Why is it out of bounds? Well, remember, this has 4 items, but the index goes from 0 to 3. So I have tried to access an item that goes beyond what this array actually is sized for. And that's the sort of error you're going to get if you go too big or if you go too small. The most common reason for that mistake is someone using the length improperly. So for example here, instead of using less than length, using less than or equal to, that's probably one of the most common ways of doing that. Sometimes you will get people who might try to do marks for SVS. So this isn't necessarily going to spit out an error when you run it. It's not even going to let you do it. And the reason for this is that I haven't yet initialized it, right? Remember how we talked about this is going to create the array, but it's not actually going to reserve memory and give it a size, which means I can't use it yet because I can't use an array until it's been given a size. And so this obviously will not work until I go ahead and declare it new int size. And those are really kind of the 2 main mistakes people use. People have. Sometimes people want to change the size of an array or reuse an array for something else. And once an array is declared like this, I did say you can't resize it, but you can create it again. You can reuse that variable if you want. So down here, for example, I could say y equals new int, and I could give it a new size. But that's not actually changing the size. It's creating a brand new array, getting rid of all of the data in the old one, and reserving 23 spots now for a new list of integers. So it is possible to reuse this variable and to create something new, just like a string. You could give it a new string, but that old string is lost. Same sort of idea here with that. So I hope you learned a couple tidbits about arrays from this lesson, and please don't hesitate to throw in a comment or email to me if you have any questions or suggestions. Thank you.